Welcome to the third Blue Forge Group Open Mic Campus event. My name is Maxwell DeMarco. I'm an artisan working with 3 out of 4 of Blue Forge's divisions and a full-time on-site volunteer. Blue Forge Group is an entirely volunteer-run 501c3 nonprofit founded in 1989, dedicated to educating and empowering artisans who've been marginalized by the mainstream. Our artisans couldn't be more different. They might not always get along on social media, but when they unite under the Blue Forge banner, the art always comes first. Tonight, we'll hear from artisans from Blue Forge Press. They'll each step into the spotlight of the Black Box Studio here on the Blue Forge campus and earn this month's Open Mic Badge, created by actor and illustrator Faith DeMarco. And now, without further ado,
Hi, my name's Bree Indigo, and I've worked as a volunteer with Blue Forge Group since 2008, primarily with Blue Forge Press, Blue Forge Sound, and Blue Forge Films. And today I'm going to be reading my contribution to the horror anthology, Unnerving Phobia. I wrote for the January story. There's a story for each month of the year and one extra because it's spooky because 13. But this is my contribution for January. It is called Survivor's Guilt. The president is on TV again, but this time no one mentions affairs or that woman, and his words are familiar to my 10-year-old mind. Sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. I don't fully comprehend the tragedy that occurred, the chaos, confusion, and bloodshed, or the word that would become synonymous with school shooting, Columbine. He is promoting peer mediation as a fix for the massacre that happened 2 days ago in Colorado, oversimplifying Dylan and Eric's lives and pacifying the public with children's rhymes, explaining that words can and do hurt, creating a legacy of victim blaming and mental health scapegoating, while ignoring the truth that our great nation can't keep its kids safe. Practicing lockdown becomes as regular as fire and earthquake drills. But we have our first real lockdown that same year, when an armed robbery suspect cuts through our school campus with the Everett police, also armed, in pursuit. More than a dozen years pass, and I'm backstage at the Ballet Winter Showcase when we learned what happened at Sandy Hook Elementary that day. I stay focused on my kiddo, costume and scene changes, and it isn't until we get home that the reality sets in. A deep, dark, Vanta black pit grows in my stomach. Sorrow tinged with guilt that I am here watching Glee with my children, while there are parents who sent their kids to school that morning and will never see them again. 6.5 years later, on a Saturday afternoon, I'm with my daughter at our favorite mall, where all the best stores have at least 2 floors, when we hear a commotion behind us, loud and frantic, like a rack of pots and pans crashing to the floor. We turn to see a wave of people running panicked past us and down the stairs. My blood runs cold and fills me with a strange, hollow calm. I find someone with a name tag, but they're not sure what's happening either, but says they're locking down the store and we should hide. Crouching behind a wall, someone says they heard someone say there was a shooting outside maybe, and the cold in my veins crystallizes into shards of ice or glass. Everyone is outwardly calm as the moments stretch and we wait to see what will happen next. But then finally, in what could have been 5 minutes or 50, a manager gives the all clear and an announcement comes over the mall's loudspeakers. There's been a fabricated incident due to a YouTube celebrity trying to cause a panic. Please remain calm. We were safe that day. There wasn't a real threat, just a glimpse of what could be. And what did happen last year, more than once, at that same mall. Only this time, we weren't there. But someone else's daughter was. And she never went home to her mom or her family. She'll never have another birthday or graduate nursing school and create a family of her own. Instead, she's forever 17, frozen in time, loved and missed, but gone. A quarter century has passed since Columbine, but the rhetoric remains the same. We offer thoughts and prayers and hope it doesn't happen again, and again, and again, while changing nothing and fulfilling the definition of insanity. But we are told that we can't live in fear. So we go out to the movies and try not to think about The Dark Knight, to Walmart and try to forget the shootings that happened at our local store, to video game competitions at Mandalay Bay with brand new metal detectors. And we teach our high schoolers how to play dead, fake blood capsules in their mouths, and Teflon shields in their backpacks, while we argue about gun control on Facebook. As if Australia hasn't already shown that mass shootings can be nearly entirely prevented by outlawing semi-auto and automatic firearms. As if the numbers are lying, that 77% of mass shooters kill with legally purchased firearms. And our inability to take action guarantees we will always live in fear. There were more mass shootings in 2023 in the United States than days in the year. How many will this new year bring?
Hi, I'm Dave Martin, and I'm with Blue Forge Press, and I'd like to read to you from a little novella, The Great Gig Harbor Canoe Caper. And it's a backstory for a novel, The Bells of Redemption. In this passage, my two young hero and heroine are 13 years old. The sun was still low above Point Defiance, and a halo of white clouds crowned Mount Rainier when we lashed the two canoes together and dropped a makeshift mast and tall angled boom in place. Dad's ferry was across at Point Defiance, beginning the first load of the day, and there were no onlookers as we fitted the mast, the sail, tied the boom sheet, and laid out the steering oar at the stern. I surveyed this thing of beauty, an authentic Polynesian-style sailing canoe ready to conquer the Puget Sound. A paddle to help against the doldrums, sculling with the steering oar may not be enough. Linda, we need a paddle, just in case. Right. I'll be right back. 5 minutes later, she dropped a canoe paddle into the Indian canoe. Don't ask me where she procured it. I was beginning to learn her ways. Rigged out and in the water, we both stared with pride and admiration at our work. I broke the silence. Well, I figure we take her out in the harbor just to get the feel of her and make sure she stays taut. Don't be a chicken, Ike. She's perfect. I say head for Point Defiance. Sail her like she's meant to be sailed. If you're so darn certain everything is perfect without so much as a simple test, I dare you to sail her out into the Sound. Linda jumped into the back of the Indian canoe. Cast off and jump in. We're heading for Point Defiance and beyond. I shook my head. There's no turning back when Linda took a dare. She swept with the steering oar and I paddled from forward. The water gets deep fast, and soon we were well point the sandspit that guarded Gig Harbor. It was time to set the sail. I lowered the angle boom from its upright position and passed a sheet to Linda. She hauled in the sheet to make for a beam reach. She struggled to handle the sheet and the heavy steering oar together. We picked up speed but made no headway. We were being blown downwind. No keel or centerboard. I'm an idiot. I stuck the paddle between the two hulls and we began to make headway. Hooray! It works. Linda struggled with the main sheet. I heard a splash. I turned around to see Linda bobbing in the water behind the canoe. I scrambled over the crossbeam and pushed out the steering oar. Grab on, I'll pull you back. When she pulled on the steering oar, I slipped and fell face first into the canoe. I heard the oar as it splashed into the water behind me. Slipping and sliding, my feet searched for traction. I heard another splash. The only paddle went overboard as well. Luckily, Linda was a strong swimmer, and in moments her wet blonde head popped up over the stern. Pull me up, please. The water is freezing. I took my time and sat securely in the canoe and grabbed the straps of her coveralls. The buttons popped off and she slid back down. Let's try again, Ike. You got this. She laughed as she spoke. Looking at her in the water, I froze. Where do I dare grab her? I reached for the top of the bottoms of her coveralls. Careful at first, but finally hauling her up by her bottom with both hands. She slipped into the canoe like a seal clambering onto a dock. She rolled over and laughed. We both laughed. It was a moment of true joy that I will never forget. She lay there smiling at me, and I was smiling back. And then I noticed the top of her coveralls was hanging down, and beneath her white t-shirt, I saw she had, Linda, I stuttered, you have a chest. What an idiot I was. A chest? She wasn't embarrassed at all. She looked down at her small breast pointed up under her shirt, looked back at me and smiled. Well, of course, girls become women. Duh. And you may even become a man yourself someday. It's called growing up. Then she squinted at me. Do you think I'm pretty? Pretty enough for a boyfriend? I gushed, you're the prettiest girl in Gig Harbor. Heck, good Baptists don't use the H word. I think you're the prettiest girl in the world. Then I closed my eyes. Dark clouds blurred my mind. I stammered, are you looking for a boyfriend? I guess every girl is, Linda admitted. But I got a good-looking fella in mind, not just a boyfriend, but the marrying type. I was crushed. My best friend was looking at other boys. Oh, I muttered, well, you'll still be my best friend. My best friend because... I didn't finish. Linda sat up and kissed me, our first kiss. Her cold, wet lips against mine. It felt strange, but I didn't want to stop. After a few seconds, she pulled away. The steering oar, we have to paddle over and get it. The wind and the tide are both taking us out towards Tacoma. My head fell back and my eyes closed. I'm an idiot. The paddle was gone too. I pointed towards Salmon Flats. It's gone too. We're adrift. If we're lucky, we'll ground at Brown's Point. If we're unlucky, the next stop will be the North Sound and out the Straits of Juan de Fuca. Linda stared in disbelief. Then she began to laugh. Well, like Curtis, I can't think of anyone I'd rather be marooned with. And with that, she lay her head in my lap. Our few moments of bliss were ended by the 5 loud, scary blasts of a steam whistle, the universal danger signal. Looking up, we saw the black hull and white superstructure of a ferry, Gig Harbor, painted on the bow. Ferry boat crew and members scrambled and pulled us alongside. Once safe aboard, they hauled up the 2 canoes, untied the outrigger, and stowed them out of the way of the few cars on board. Dad appeared outside the pilot house and stared down at us. After an eternity, he said, son, get up here. We need to talk. What happened next? Well, Dad and I agreed to secrecy. Let's just say Baptists aren't strong on sparing the rod and spoiling the child. And if you like this, please check out my Bells of War series. The first is the Bells of Redemption with Blue Forge Press. Thank you.
I'm Pauline Uvalde, and I'm an artisan who works with Blue Forge Press and Blue Forge Films. My open mic presentation for March 2026 will discuss how I learned long-form creative writing. I will discuss my formal education in creative writing, the issues I found with the method I chose, and the final format that I eventually used to write the novella. My formal creative writing education consists of the creative writing specialization that I obtained from Wesleyan University on Coursera in 2024. The plot outline that I obtained from that specialization, I use to this day with major caveats that I'll discuss later. The first 4 courses, talking about the craft of plot, character, setting and description, and style, teach skills related to each of these broad disciplines. And the 5th and final course, the capstone, requires students to write a 15-page short story or portion of a memoir or creative nonfiction essay. At the time when I took the course, I found the skills in it very valuable, but as I began writing thesis, I found several issues with it. First off, the advice provided pertained to creative writing in general, not from a specific genre, and in spite of the fact that the capstone requires writing an extended piece, I didn't find that the instructors advised students on how to scale up their writing to an entire novel, rather than something longer than the capstone piece. In fact, to complete the capstone, I connected together and edited the 4 pieces that I submitted as my final writing assignments for the 4 previous courses in the specialization. Lastly, I found that either the authors discussed examples of the skills they were teaching about in their own writing rather than branching out to other people's work, and in that way I didn't find their examples to be as either widely applicable or well known, so I couldn't reference them myself. Due to the shortcomings while writing thesis, I used the only long-form writing format that I was familiar with, which was from the YouTube web series called The Kill Count, which covers the plot, behind-the-scenes information, and context behind diverse horror media. And it's hosted by both horror fans and film critics James A. Janice, Chelsea Rebecca, and Zoran Gaboyich. I found The Kill Count to be an unconventional learning experience, which informed how I wrote the book and how I organized everything. I wrote content similar to what I saw in The Kill Count made Janice audibly emote, and what I would want Janice to include in a kill count video for thesis if thesis was a film or TV show, which would include accounting for what he would consider the strengths and weaknesses of the plot for thesis and tweaking it accordingly. The research that I would need to perform to make the novella compelling and that he would find interesting enough to include in a kill count, and the real-life context for the time period writing thesis and the novella's final release window. Obviously, when discussing the kills, I would ensure that when I was working in references to prior works, that I did so correctly without overshadowing my own work, because someone like Janice would cover them anyway. As for how I implemented these aspects, I essentially made slasher film facing adjustments to the plot outline from Wesleyan University. Not only did the outline contain the plot for each major scene or later on chapter, I included the lead-ups, the descriptions of, and immediate aftermaths of each kill. And to write each chapter, I connected these outlines and fleshed them out by formalizing the plot and adding formal dialogue. I found that this was the only way that I could scale up from writing individual scenes to the entire book without either compromising quality or bloating turnaround times.
Hello, my name is Marvin Vial, and I work for Blue Forge Press and Blue Forge Gaming. And now I'm going to read from a short story that I wrote published by Blue Forge Press. It's called Choices. He was a big man, 6'3", 209 pounds. He had the build of an athlete, which he had been in his earlier years. His hair was black and wiry, indicative of his African heritage, although by this time tomorrow would be gone. A 2-inch scar above his left eye lent a somewhat sinister look to his otherwise strong countenance. Marcus sat quietly on the edge of the bed in a corner of his small, virtually bare room, reviewing his life and how it had come to this. And now, barring some last-minute reprieve, this would be his last day. They had allowed him a visit earlier that morning from his wife Jeannie and his children, Marcus Jr. and Natishi. He had tried unsuccessfully to dissuade Jeannie from coming, because the visit had to take place behind the impersonal glass screens. The inability to touch and hold his wife and children one last time was nearly unbearable. Jeannie, of course, had cried, and the children appeared bewildered. They were too young to fully understand what was going on and why Daddy had to leave them. leave them, but he had no choice. He glanced around. The silence of bare walls was broken by an open doorway leading to a bathroom and another door leading into the secure corridor. The room was furnished with a single bed, amazingly comfortable for an institutional facility, a small writing desk in case he wished to put any last thoughts on paper, a chair and a small table where he would eat his last meals. The only other furnishings were the television attached to the wall near the ceiling, the monitoring cameras, and an omnipresent digital clock mounted above the television. The general starkness of the room was in vivid contrast to his only direct connection with the outside world, and it was where his family came to rest. On the wall opposite of where Marcus sat was an unbreakable glass window. Through it he could see the red and purple remains of the Texas sunset, silhouetting a high chain-link fence and guarded gates. The scene invoked a strong memory of a similar but vastly different place. He was 15 when he had been arrested and taken to juvenile detention. If he squinted, he could almost feel he was once again in juvie. He recalled the choice that had sent him there. He accepted a dare from his so-called friends to put on the starter jacket and walking out of the store. His thoughts turned to his high school years and choices he had made. He thought of the DARE program, when the 2 police officers had come to a central city school to warn and educate the students of the dangers of drugs and gangs. Ironically, it was only 6 weeks later that his brother Willie had been slain in a drive-by shooting. He thought of his mother, a hard-working but poorly educated domestic woman who had wept uncontrollably for 3 days after the police chaplain had informed her of Willie's death. Marcus remembered how she had gotten on her knees and begged him to stay away from the drugs, which had indirectly killed his brother. He thought of her plea to make something good of his life. He thought of his mother's sacrifice when she had sold her family home and moved to Kitsap County so he could escape their deteriorating neighborhood. His eyes teared as he realized he would never see his mother again. The doctor had given her less than a year to live. While he had talked to her by phone, her health had prevented her from making the journey from the West Coast for a final farewell. Shaking his head, he brought his attention back to the present. A slight smile found its way to his otherwise stoic countenance. It doesn't look like they will call the game on account of rain, he thought, remembering the old saying about red at night, a sailor's delight. This stray thought about games being canceled triggered memories of his favorite high school coach, who had pushed him to excel in sports. It had been Coach Biggers who had initially suggested the military might be his best chance to distance himself from the debilitating of his neighborhood. Had it been only a little over a year since he'd been back to attend the coach's memorial service. Seemed like a lifetime ago. He wondered what his coach would think of his latest and biggest game in which he was to be the featured player. I'm going to stop right there, but I must warn the people who are listening to this that the ending may not be what you think. This is unnerving, toxic.
Hi, my name is Jennifer DeMarco. I have volunteered as a on-site volunteer for Blue Forge Group since 1989. And as an artisan, I work with all 4 of Blue Forge Group's divisions: Blue Forge Press, Blue Forge Films, Blue Forge Gaming, and Blue Forge Sound. Today, I'm going to be reading from my short story collection, Hannah at Night and 12 Other Stories. And I am going to be reading the first 5 minutes of my story, Lost in Translation. Lost in Translation. There is a quality to light as it passes through a population of dust that is mesmerizing even in the worst moments. The way the white gold winter sun, the pale sun of a dying year, enrobes each particle and transforms it into something more than entropy, something more than the aftermath of a world war still inundating the trade winds, into something divine yet fleeting, momentary, but irrevocably worth watching, worth admiring, and perhaps, in rare, horrendous, and unprecedented moments, sometimes worth possessing. I'm jealous of dust. It's unencumbered by the New World Order, free to move and exist as it is. I'm jealous of the 7.5 billion of my kind, who are nothing now but dust themselves. Never before have I been jealous of the dead. Your delivery was delayed. My palms are flat against the hardwood floor. Dust settles between my fingers. I am kneeling in a pool of sunlight. I am kneeling in the cinders of the dead. Were you ill? My pounding heart threatens to break through my breastbone and tumble, still throbbing, into my lap. I imagine impossible horrors like this far too frequently since I saw our world fall impossibly fast. As far as I know, they don't get sick. The idea of a faulty immune system amuses them. My mouth chooses self-preservation over the fear trying to choke me. I wasn't ill, Josiah. As instructed by Director Anna Rode at the San Francisco Alignment Center, I use the Gibtrion equivalent for commander, a designation in their complex society where cultural, spiritual, political, and martial are all interwoven. I know how lucky I am to be here instead of in a classroom, in a zoo, or on a laboratory table. I also know that my owner, like all Gibtrion, is long and slender, a will-o'-the-wisp stretched tall, with a penchant for collecting the exotic and unique. My stress-induced weight loss was corrected aggressively as soon as I was purchased. The intravenous feeds had burned through me like napalm in my veins. Good. It's not time to look up. I was hooded during transport because they insist we stay calmer when we see less. I don't mind the blinders. They make sense. But ignorance is not bliss. I know what we crushed on the road on the way here today, what the spiked treads of the Leviathan ground into the earth that is no longer ours. Burning bodies is wasteful, I heard Director Anna Rhodes say once. Healthy bodies can be consumed, meaning not consumed by them. They were vegan. The tainted can be turned into the soil with terraforming microbes to... I'd tuned out or blocked out the rest. Some of those tainted bodies had been my friends, my family, my wife, my son. Do you have a name? I wonder for just an instant how long I can stay silent. How long can I not answer a direct question? I consider counting the seconds, but before I reach 2, my mouth is already moving. My name is whatever you wish, Josiah. I sense pleasure. Approval? They don't make wordless sounds like oh or to express raw emotions, as was, so common with humans. They project their emotions, containing not so much a tone of voice as the breadth and depth of a diapason. These projections lace between their words. In short, my owner is pleased I'm so well trained. I wish to know your human name. The words are not spoken. They are not shared aloud the way we speak. They are broadcast in some type of waveform that thrums against our eardrums while leaving the room silent. Something about the neuroimplants they bored into our heads. Almost imperceptibly, my hands shake. The hardwood floor is polished oak, polished by generations of humans coming and going from this room once occupied by a Silicon Valley millionaire. How interesting that the aesthetics of the American 1% match the aesthetics of our executioners. How apropos. Despite my conditioning, despite my now intrinsic, now biological fear of pain, I hold off answering. I know the Gibtrion sometimes find our names challenging. I don't want to. First, my neck warms beneath my wide silicone collar. Then my face tingles. This will be my only warning. I answer, Renee. Rana? Renee. Oh my God, what have I done? My adrenaline spikes. I hear my blood in my ears, feel it in my cheeks. Was my indoctrination too efficient or not efficient enough? Despite not being asked a direct question, I spoke. I corrected. Is my will even my own? You'll find the rest of this story in Hannah at Night and 12 Other Stories. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for the third Blue Forge Group Open Mic Campus event. This video was filmed live on March 28th, 2026 and was made possible by viewers like you. Find out how you can support an inclusive, nonpartisan, art-focused nonprofit at www.blueforgegroup.org.